So I covered a story a couple of days ago about how the Texas State Board of Education was pushing for and proposing adding mandatory Bible study and Bible readings to public classrooms for all grades, basically. And that they were supposed to have the vote on it a few days ago. Well, they had the vote on it, and unsurprisingly, they voted in favor of adopting this plan. Bible stories have become required reading for more than 5 million public school students in Texas. The vote to approve the plan Friday by the Republican-controlled state Texas Board of Education reflects a broader conservative effort to introduce more religion into U.S. schools. Last year, Texas became the largest state to require every classroom to display the Ten Commandments. So this doesn't have anything to do with how much you like your Christianity or how much you agree with the Bible or how much you love Jesus or anything like that, right? This has to do with secularism, with the principles of the United States. The Founding Fathers very clearly intended that the United States be a secular nation. One of the core principles of secularism is that you're not supposed to favor one religion over another, right? You're not supposed to favor Christianity over Islam, over Judaism, over Hinduism, but you're also not supposed to favor religion over non-religion, right? All of these things are equal within the eyes of the law and should be equally separated from the law, from government, from the way that our society is constructed and operates. And that, you have freedom of religion. You can practice whatever you want. You can believe whatever you want. And you can even send your kid to whatever religious school you want. But you're not supposed to have religion directly in government. And public schools are absolutely an extension of government. And that's why it's so problematic of the Ten Commandments being in classrooms. And even more problematic is having mandatory Bible studies in classrooms, right? Because not everybody is Christian. Now, if you want to send your kid to some private school, some religious private school where they have Bible study every few hours or once a day or whatever, you are more than willing to do that, but that's private. Those are private businesses that offer that as a service. You could make arguments against this, but we've even gone as far as a society to allow those to be legitimate sources of education, that you can have a religious institution provide a legitimate high school degree or whatever. We allow that. So if you want to do that, you have the ability to do that. But in public schools that are funded by taxpayers, that are ruled by government rules, should be subject to secularism, to the rules of it, right? If, they want to have Bible study in classrooms, they want to have the Ten Commandments in all the classrooms, right? But I guarantee you they would not be in favor of having you read stories from the Quran in public classrooms, right? This is a very clear religious bias from the Christians that happened, and arguably Christian nationalists that happen to make up a large part of the Republican Party, especially so in Texas, in the Bible Belt, in the South and whatnot. The mandated reading list has drawn fierce opposition. Critics argue that it violates the constitutional separation of church and state, lacks diversity, and favors Christianity over other religions. That's very clearly the case, right? If they came out, whenever they were voting on this, right, whenever this was proposed a week or two ago, if they proposed, okay, we're going to do a suite of different religious stories, we're going to do these couple of Quran stories, we're going to do these couple of stories from the Hindu texts, we're going to do these couple of stories from the Bible, and they could probably even get away with having there being a disproportionate amount from the Bible when doing that. So long as they had representation from all of these different major religions, I'm sure it would look at least a little bit less biased. But the fact that they are only picking stories from the Christian Bible in doing so, it seems extremely it's very obvious what they're doing here, right? It shows a very clear religious bias, which is against the concepts of the freedom of religion and secularism. And also, it's using government to indoctrinate children, to push religion onto children, using public schools, using the government, which is very much wrong. And this is not about you being Christian. This is not about how much you love Jesus or you think Bible stories are important. That's not the way you should be thinking about this, okay? You are not a bad Christian if you are against this sort of thing. You're just a good American if you're against this sort of thing, right? You can be a good Christian and believe in the teachings of Jesus and the importance of the Bible and everything, and also understand how important secularism is to the founding of our nation, right? What was it, John Adams, when he was asked during the Treaty of Trudeau, or one of these treaties, I'll put it on screen, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but he was asked at the very beginning of our nation, why don't you go to war with the Islamic nations? And he said very clearly, because America is not a Christian nation, right? We are a secular nation with the separation of church and state. with freedom of religion, right? That was one of the main reasons that this country was founded in the first place, right? I know no taxation without representation was one of the big reasons, but the other big reason was freedom of religion, that the various different sects of Christianity in England especially a lot of them were experiencing various forms of persecution because they didn't exactly align with what the government wanted, with what the crown wanted at that exact time. And so they came here, and it became the first real home of religious freedom, of being able to believe whatever you want. And so, yeah, this very clearly goes against the Constitution, and especially so what the Founding Fathers intended. They did not mince words on this. There was no ambiguity on this. They were very clearly in favor of secularism. And secularism is not you separating yourself from religion. It's ensuring that government is separated from religion, right? And public schooling is absolutely, without question, a part of government. And if you don't want your child there to have a secular education, then send them to a private school or whatever. Those exist almost exclusively for that exact reason, right? Most private institutions are religious institutions for that very reason. I'm sure there are some private schools that aren't explicitly religious, but the vast, vast majority of them are for this exact reason, right? Because lots of people want their kids to have a religious foundation to their education, right? Which I don't think is right. Okay, I think it's important that you teach your kid evolution and have them exposed to different types of people and cultures and all that sort of thing, right? To understand what LGBT is. And so they have the opportunity to understand who they are, why they are, what they are. Yeah, I don't need to retread all this ground. I'm going to keep it short. But yeah, this is, they unsurprisingly went ahead and improved this sort of thing. And I would not be surprised, I would not be surprised if this somehow gets kicked up to the Supreme Court. If the Ten Commandments was allowed to stand in these classrooms, that decision they made a few years ago that requires the Ten Commandments to be posted in every public classroom in Texas. If they allowed that to stand, I imagine that they will probably allow this to stand. But if it was a more reasonable Supreme Court makeup, I would say something like, it wouldn't surprise me if this gets kicked up to the Supreme Court and they knock this down because it's against concepts of principles of secularism or whatever that are fairly clearly laid out in the Constitution and what the Founding Fathers intended. Knowing this current Supreme Court makeup, I think they would probably allow this. So yeah, just an update on that. Unfortunate. Because I'm pretty sure something like 10% of all students in the entire United States or something like that come from Texas, or some high percentage, right? We have one of the highest in Texas numbers of public school children in the entire country. So this has a humongous impact and is a clear violation of secularism, of the religion, freedom of religion, of the non-favoring of one religion over the other, or of religiosity over non-religiosity. So this is very clearly against what the Constitution and the Founding Fathers intended.